So is remuneration about the job you do or what you do for the job? It's all very JFK. Salaries have been top of mind for many South Africans since the release of the proposed national minimum wage on Sunday, R3,500 a month. But according to Bloomberg, the ranking of CEO compensation in South Africa means that South African CEOs do very well. In India, take-home pay is really good compared to the income generated by an average worker. And of course, in South Africa, it's a multiple of that as well. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight, we talk about what remuneration is all about. Joining me to talk about it, Andrew Woodburn, who is the Managing Director at Woodburn Mann and also Master Rewards Specialist. Dr. Mark Bussin, Executive Committee Member at the South African Reward Association and also Chairperson of 21st Century. Oh, sorry, we're out of time because we had to do Mark Bussin's title. Andrew Woodburn, CEOs, are they worth it?
If the market deems so, yes. If they deliver the returns, if they lead the business to growth, delivery to shareholders, ensure that the corporate citizenship responsibility is delivered with, then why not? They're a flexible resource. They compete in a global marketplace. And if the marketplace here cannot sustain the reward they need versus a competitive opportunity somewhere else, they're mobile, they will move, just like good old economics.
So what you're saying is chief executives around the world are overpaid. I mean, it's a global debate.
I wouldn't say overpaid. I'd say that there are areas where there may be overpayment, but I'd say in general there are a lot of chief executives who take a lot of stress and pressure on their shoulders to do the right thing.
7 people watching, at least 7 people, maybe 12, no, maybe it's 15 on my meter this evening are going doodums, poor CEOs. They take on so much stress. They're A-type personalities. They were generally head boy or head girl at school. They were always destined for the top. That's their destiny. They are fueled by unnecessary greed. That's a popular perception of it.
May well be. Don't think it's quite correct.
Okay. Don't think it's quite correct. Mark Bussin, what do we do about the problem of CEO pay? Because in a place like South Africa, executive pay is regarded as a problem rather than as an incentive to get great individuals, as Andrew Woodburn paints them to be, to perform properly.
So the problem can be addressed in many ways. The first way, I think, is communication. We need to explain what the CEOs do to earn that amount. Once you know what someone did to earn a 15 million rand bonus, they created 20,000 jobs, they created shareholder return of X and Y, they opened so many stores, sold so many of the next thing, then people at least know what they did, because right now people don't know what they do. Secondly, the optics of how we do it. We present it in a way that the average person actually doesn't understand. We need to simplify the reporting, and we need to make sure that folk know that what people do. And the last one is the regulatory risk and the Companies Act that shows that you can go to jail. The fiduciary responsibilities are so high, so rigorous, that a lot of CEOs are saying, hey, you know, it's not worth it anymore. Once we communicate what's involved, then I think we're going somewhere in closing that perception of the problem.
Does King 4 tackle the issue of executive pay? Does it do it directly?
Yes, very much so. So for the first time, it is implied that you need to have a look at your pay gap ratio. Your pay gap ratio is what is the difference or the ratio in pay between your lowest paid worker and your highest paid worker. And you need to report on that now. You need to say what it is and why it is like it is. You also need to report a single figure for the CEO. That makes it a lot easier for you to work out what they get paid.
Now that's really interesting. I mean, you have to, I'm sure, include the calculations in your annual financial statements as to how you got to the number, but then you don't have the disparity and the disagreements as to whether or not Bloomberg, which takes future earnings as a result of share options 5 years from now and accounts for them now and says that's what you get paid in the year of issue, because those options may never amount to anything depending on what happens in the economic cycle, for example.
Absolutely. And now we can say, this is how you got to the number, these are the calculations. I may not agree with your calculation, but I can see what you did. And at least you're now adding it up for me, and you don't leave it to me to guess and do my own calculations.
I mean, you work for yourself, but have you ever had an 11% pay increase in 1 year?
No, I haven't. I wish I did have.
Have you ever had 7 consecutive 11% increases?
No, I haven't. I wish I did.
Because that's what CEOs have got, Andrew Woodburn, since 2009. According to the independent research from Kokela, they did the research. They looked at 2009, average CEO wage from 2009 to 2016 has gone up 11% a year. CEO salaries, on average, have practically doubled from, say, 7 to nearly 14 million rand. Being a CEO may be a hazardous job, but boy, it's well paid.
Absolutely. And I think that, as Professor Bussin has mentioned, the first thing is to understand what they do, but also to understand that there's a finite life these days to a CEO, that they don't sit in roles like some we've seen over time for life, generating compound increases forever, right? They're almost like
half of CEOs in South Africa seldom make it past a 6-year mark.
Correct. The average roughly is around 7 to 8 and declining. In addition to which, with the volatility of world markets, what we now see is that a CEO that's good for this period of time is no longer the horse to win the race in depression or recession. Actually, they're probably depressed by it, but in recession. And or that same CEO can maintain the performance in a tough market is the wrong horse in a growth market.
The CEO pays all well and good. What about the minimum wage proposals that have been put on the table by NEDLAC? Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing those, and he's been shot down on social media very aggressively for slave wage levels of 3,500 rand. For half the people who work around that sort of level, they'd be better off at a 3,500 rand a month pay than they are now.
Yeah, so fascinating point. I'm also an economist, so I always trend back to the supply and demand equation. So fundamentally, I'm probably against regulatory rules about how this has to be done. Having said that, with our Gini coefficient being so large, certainly guidelines on what is believed to be a minimum wage might be helpful. I know that Prof. Bussin's got some insight as into votes on minimum wages and what they've done in various countries. But I'm of the opinion that I think a guideline would be beneficial, and probably at a point where there's an understanding before the decision's made of what that supply and demand change is going to mean. Raise the salary. Does that mean fewer people employed? So then we're making a critical decision.
We've already got 27.1% of the South African population unemployed. If you take the expanded reading, which takes it up to 36%, that's the people who've given up trying to find a job, because trying to do that is expensive and time-consuming and energy-sapping and soul-destroying. And people after a couple of years do tend to give up. It's human nature. We have a confidence crisis, business confidence, consumer confidence, voter confidence crisis potentially in South Africa. It's, are we shooting ourselves in the foot with the minimum wage?
No, I think it's a step in the right direction. It's a start. So the finesse is making it too high and losing jobs versus starting somewhere and people being annoyed that it's too low. It can be repealed. It can be looked at in a year's time or 2 years' time or 3 years' time. But it's a start, and it's a start in the right direction. It's a start to close the wage gap. There's a whole economic calculation around whether you are doing the government a service or whether you're doing the underpaid a service. And if I could buy 1 litre of milk with my low wage at the moment, the minute I earn a lot more, the milk people have to pay their people a lot more. The milk price goes up.
It's inflation.
And I'm into another tax bracket. I may not be able to afford that same litre of milk. So a lot of calculations went into coming up at the 3,500, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, it's a step in the right direction, but it may exclude future generations of low-skilled workers from the jobs market.
It does, and that's the trade-off you have to make. It's the trade-off between a step in the right direction versus employment. My personal view, employment trumps minimum wage. So that's a very personal view. I think it's better to have a job at a lower rate. But of course, those who are in those jobs feel that they're being exploited and wouldn't share my view.
No, and you are going to feel exploited if the boss is earning 14 million rand a year or more.
And now we come back to the optics. You know, the optics just have got to be right. And it's insensitive to be paying that and then coming in your red Ferrari and flashing it all out. Not that you have to hide it, but I think you need to be more transparent, and you've got distributive justice and procedural justice. And the distributive justice is the absolute amount, and the procedural justice is how did you determine that person's pay?
Do we soften the blow a little bit for people at the bottom end of the earning scale and make people at the top end of the earning scale pay a lot more tax to be seen to be making a greater contribution of their earnings? Yes, they deserve to be paid lots of money, but actually they have to put back a lot more into the system.
This is an endless debate between capitalism and socialism and communism and whatever ideology you want to go. I am of the opinion that I believe one leaves it up to the free choice of the individual. So let's say you earn 50 million and you want
to have that problem.
And you want to buy a Ferrari, but you can choose to buy a Toyota. Then I certainly believe the Toyota, being a base, let's say, vehicle to get from A to B, should be at an affordable rate, with a middling tax rate because the government needs to generate
VAT at
revenue.
14% on the Toyota. Buy
Correct.
the Ferrari, pay
But if you
50%.
choose 100%, if you choose to go luxury for whatever reason that's not deemed to necessarily be required, then if there's a premium to the taxman on that, I think it's your choice to decide. I'm not in favour of
I've suggested it
overt
to National
regulatory.
Treasury. I have, and they said
Yeah.
it's a bit complicated. But it would be it's a nice
Well,
idea.
I'll tell Treasury it's not complicated. They run VAT at the moment. It's the most efficient tax collection system in the country. There's the fewest number of companies collecting VAT. It would be the easiest thing to manage a graduated
If you want to
system.
wear a Citizen
Done.
watch, or by all means, if you want to wear a tag, you pay a bit more. If you want to wear a
100%.
Rolex, you pay a
So
lot
my
more.
response to you is I'm not against a variable tax regime. We have it already.
Yeah.
You just fall into a band.
Now-
But let's put it on consumption and give the individual the choice to choose it. I can choose to drink milk or I can choose to drink champagne. And I will pay appropriately for my choice, no matter what my income.
There we go. I think champagne's probably better for your heart. Let's just talk about proportionately. South Africa CEOs earn well relative to the rest of the world, but it's not only CEOs and executive directors of companies, complex companies in complex societies who do well. Our diplomats, as it turns out, also score
I want to
rather
just
well
correct you on that. South
this one.
African CEOs don't earn well compared to the rest of the world. They earn well compared to the society we're in.
Okay,
The
fair
Americans earn very well compared to the rest of the world. So that's critical to understand. Likewise, our diplomats compared to the rest of the world are outperforming in their income
Oh, right, sorry. For a moment I thought you got soft.
against others. You know, we are not a critical economic power globally as much as we'd like to think we are. And therefore, to be absolutely honest, are our diplomats going out there generating massive trade deals, pulling in massive foreign direct investment, and therefore are regarded as best in class and should receive competitive income or excessive income? I'm not sure anyone would be able to prove that.
But
So
the numbers, comparative numbers, suggest in some cases our diplomats are paid 4 and 5 times more than even diplomats from the US, which is, when I last checked, still the world's biggest economy.
So my point being, I think that in some cases our state is not well balanced on how they understand what's done and what should be paid.
He's looking for a job in the diplomatic corps, Mark.
I can see it.
I mean, is it an outrage?
Yeah, the diplomats is a worse situation in my book than the CEO situation, because the delivery relative to what the CEOs are delivering is substantially less. The international comparison, as Andrew mentioned quite rightly, is quite a lot more. I'm not entirely sure that the CEOs in South Africa are earning up there among the ranks, despite recent articles. They got the numbers wrong. I think we are halfway down the list somewhere. But the other problem with government is that there are too many. There's too many. So it's not just that the wages are, there's just a lot of them. So two things are required. One is to freeze that pay and adjust it. And the second one is to make sure that there are fewer people. The only time where I think it's justified is when you're going to a place that's disruptive and you wouldn't ordinarily choose to go there, and it's really difficult to be there.
It's called danger pay.
Yes, that's fine. But then call it that. Call it a hardship allowance where for religious or infrastructure or...
Some people might say if you leave South Africa, you should be paid less. You should get danger pay for staying in the diplomatic service in South Africa. Andrew Woodburn, Managing Director at Woodburn Mann, and also Master Award Specialist Dr. Mark Bussin. Is he professor or doctor? You call him professor. He's he's got so many titles. Very clever.
He knows
Executive Committee member at the South African Reward Association. There'll be more contentious money issues to discuss on future Moneymakers. For now, though, hold on to what you have, sleep tight, and do remember you could be considerably worse off yourself, of course, as South Africa's pay debate gets increasingly complicated. But perhaps King Ford does have the solution, and that solution is better disclosure. Good night.